of switching this meeting till June, pushing it back a little bit. I hope you all are having a great summer so far. As usual, we have got a very, very full agenda. So let's go ahead and get started. In the chat box, if you will please just put in some introductions, your name, your agency role, program, your title, role, and then anything that might be helpful for this group to know about you, anything about the summer you're looking forward to, just anything at all that you would like to put in that chat. And so I'll just so you all know, I'm Kathy Colley Robinson. I am the chair of this governance committee, and I'm also the chair of the education programs at Durham Tech. And so summer is flying by, y'all. I don't know how we're already at June 20th. We're going to look up and it's going to be September. Great. I see the introductions are coming in the chat. So just a few reminders of our virtual meeting protocols. Please stay muted unless you're speaking. Have your camera on if that's possible. Use the chat box. There are lots of people in here who are keeping a close eye on the chat box. Of course, we might encounter some technical challenges, so just be patient with all of us. And then if you need to leave early, just let Jenna know in the chat. Okay, here are our meeting objectives. As I mentioned, we got a full meeting. So you have already received the agenda, the presentation for today, and all of these meeting objectives. We have some things that we're going to want to vote on today, and we're also going to go into closed session about halfway through. Quick review of these objectives. We're going to start by reviewing the meeting notes. We're going to consider some end of year spending. We're going to look at the instructional compensation. We're going to go into closed session and then look at the pre-service payment and look at how that went this year for the first time trying that out. We are going to have a deeper dive into looking at instructional compensation policies and hopefully forming a subcommittee. We're going to look at the budget, get some program updates, and then we're going to talk about the schedule for next year. So lots to do. If we can go ahead and go to the next slide and get started. Okay, so you received the meeting notes from March 2024. We will need to review those and then vote to approve them. Any comments or discussion about the meeting notes? I'm not hearing anything. Any corrections needed? All right, it's all quiet. So then I'm guessing everything looks good. So I am looking for a motion to approve the March meeting notes.
I make that motion. This is Alex Hollid.
Thanks, Alex. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. It's Michelle Lynn.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, any discussion? All right, so then let's do it this way since we're virtual. If you're not in favor of approving the March meeting notes, please either raise your hand or make some notation in the comments so that we can see that you do not approve those. All right, not seeing any action. So it looks like the March meeting notes have been approved. Thank you all. Okay, so here's our first thing for discussion. So as you will recall from the March meeting, we discussed the possibility of providing some extra funding to sites if there is any leftover dollars. So that's what we are discussing here, the end of year spending authorization. And so Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us some details about this.
Okay, so you'll recall that the way our budget works, we want to spend out, of course, in support of children. And the last couple of years, we have brought to you a request to consider an end of year authorization for a classroom bonus with any remaining dollars. That varies depending upon, for example, if there's unexpected children that didn't attend or different things happen. And so you can't absolutely predict spending until it's time to pay. Of course, we have lots of projections, but for this year, we again are asking if you will authorize us, if there are dollars left, to do a classroom bonus. Last year, you'll recall that we did have quite a bit of discussion about the bonus last year to really take a deep dive on what the bonus should be, what it should look like, because there were some questions about whether we should make the bonus for a particular purpose. What you did land on last year was that you made it completely unrestricted, knowing that our programs have been impacted by inflation and a wide range of increased costs. So that was last year. You know, have the option obviously to authorize or not authorize the bonus, and you have the option to make it specific or not. We do find from our surveying of sites, you'll recall that last year at the beginning of in the fall of 2023, we reported back to you about feedback from the sites about the impact of the bonus, and the sites typically use the bonus for a very wide range of expenses, but most used it to restock classrooms and to prepare for, you know, bouncing their classrooms back from the impact of the school year. But some folks did use it for other expenses, like one site even used it to make some mechanical repairs to their air system. So we did make it unrestricted last year, and right now we think that a bonus would be around $4,000, but again, we won't know until those last payments are run and we do all of the work to close out the year. Anybody have any questions in particular that I can help you with as you consider this as an option?
I just have a clarifying question. Is this per site, per classroom? How does that work?
It's classroom. Yeah, and
Thank you.
Jason was asking the same question in the chat. Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't specific. Yes, typically what we do is we would give the bonus per classroom. And so that does mean that sites that have multiple classrooms would get, you know, the full complement of bonus per classroom.
And then unrestricted just means that they can use it in any way that they want within the site, or they have to designate that it's going to be used in the classroom specifically.
When it's unrestricted, we completely made it unrestricted, and that meant that it just had to be used in support of the site. Now, what we again when we reported out last year, what we found was that sites did use it for a variety of purposes, reported a variety of purposes. Many, surprisingly, did use it to help support their staff further in terms of some people did use it in personnel. So it was very wide ranging. You can designate that you specifically want it, you know, absolutely to go into the classroom. It would be completely up to you how you might want to restrict it. I think last year, after a lot of discussion, the feeling was that there were just such a wide range of impacts of the inflation and all the increases in needs that this group felt that directors and owners should be able to assess where their greatest needs were in using those dollars.
Yeah, and my sense is that the needs related to inflation are even more magnified this year than it was last year. Okay, so what are the thoughts? How are y'all feeling about this end of year spending authorization?
Linda, can I just ask for a little more detail, please, on how sites spent? You said to support staff. What were some of the other uses, and do you have any sense of the breakdown across sites? I kind of feel nervous about restricting the funding for a specific purpose if we haven't done that in the past and it's not a data-driven decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll ask the team to help me remember too. Joy, are you able to um look at the report that we made by chance?
Yeah, I'm working on pulling it up right now.
Thank you, I appreciate it. That way we can tell you more specifically. And I'm sorry, I should have gone back to our presentation last fall to pull up a few points. Because those are great questions. I think in terms of just answering your question about staffing, what we hear from directors, well, what we hear from owners and directors is that sometimes they feel that their personnel budgets are really strained. And you'll recall, you authorized at the March meeting, you authorized a classroom instructional bonus for the teachers and instructional assistants for this year. And they did get that, but there are other staff members who support the program, and the personnel costs are, of course, the largest expense for our childcare programs. And typically we do have a lot of staff directors who are not owners who give us feedback that they feel the strain around the personnel costs. Any luck, Joy?
I'm still working on it.
Okay. Well, what we can do, if you would feel more comfortable, is we can come back to that and give you some more information in just a little bit if folks
So
would like to. Did
I
you
just
find it?
found it.
Okay, thank you.
So is the question, can you remind me of your
Do you have
specific
anything
question?
that's like a pie chart that just could describe how those funds were used by sites?
So one thing is that sites could use it in multiple ways. So like when we asked them how they used it, they could choose multiple things.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So 100% of sites said that they used at least part of the bonus on classroom materials. So like, replenishing crayons, markers, glue, that kind of thing, as well as replacing books or, things that get lost or damaged during the year. So all the sites used at least part of the bonus on that. 44% used it for teacher compensation or benefits. So just to help with regular kind of compensation costs. 44% used it for utilities, rent, or other overhead. 22% used it for food costs. 22% used it for teacher bonuses, so above and beyond regular teacher compensation. 11% for director or administrator compensation or benefits, which is something Linda was just mentioning. And then 11% for other costs at their center, so like other classrooms or other costs maybe not directly related to the pre-K classroom. So that's when we surveyed them last fall about how they used last year's bonus, that was their response.
I mean, those all sound like worthy uses of the funds, and I propose that we offer them in an unrestricted manner again this year. Does anyone on the board?
I'll offer a second.
Yeah.
Great, thank you all. Any discussion? So we've got a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? Okay, so Linda, does anyone need to not vote on this? Do we have any conflict?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
need Dr. Pittman to recuse herself along with Miss Carter, Brenda Carter. And I'm not sure if June made it to the meeting today. If June is on, she will also need to recuse herself.
Okay,
But
great.
that's all.
Thanks. Okay, then let's vote on this. So all in favor of approving the end of year spending authorization to make that unrestricted, please indicate your approval by raising your hand or saying aye.
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 Right, anyone opposed? Same thing. All right.
Don't see any opposed.
Oh, looks like it passed fully unanimously. Thank you all. All right, I know the sites will be very appreciative of this, especially as we head
And we will
into-
report back.
Yeah,
Again, we'll do the same thing and report back again in the fall. And if you think of a particular question you may have about the bonus that you would like us to include in those survey follow-ups with the sites, please let us know. We're happy to include, additional questions.
thanks you all. All right, next, let's start talking about instructional compensation, and let's look at what has gone on in this past year.
Yeah, so the way we're going to structure this is we're going to start out in session and we're going to talk about, you'll recall that last year we made a huge change in the way that we compensate sites. So prior to the pandemic, we paid sites by attendance, enrollment and attendance, which is the customary way, the typical way in most states and definitely in North Carolina that public programs pay. But in the pandemic, we had, because of obvious reasons, we had made a change just as the state did, and we paid on allocation. That was difficult to sustain because of the fact that the priority, of course, is to be sure that we're focused completely on enrollment and attendance. And so we did a lot of work last year to review how we were paying sites, and we did vote to go back to paying on enrollment and attendance. But we were very much listening to our sites and understanding the challenge around that kind of payment model because it's difficult to budget for sites because they're not able to know for sure what their dollars will look like. We would always give them guidance to budget as for approximately 10 to 15% vacancy rates to be safe. But it was hard and it's very challenging. And we did come up with a very creative and innovative idea to pay a pre-service payment. You voted, after much study and work, you voted to create a pre-service payment for the purpose of stabilizing those instructional reimbursements for the classrooms. So what we're going to do in this section is we're first going to stay in open session and we're going to talk about the impact of our enrollment data by program site by going over a detailed report that really will show where we were this current school year in our enrollment and attendance. And obviously that attendance is what impacts how sites are able to afford to be a part of Durham PreK. It is expensive to offer the highest quality, and our reimbursements obviously are critical to the success for sustainability of the program. So after we talk about this section in open session, we are going to ask you to vote to go into closed session for us to talk about the second component of this agenda item, which will be to really talk about the actual reimbursements to sites and what it meant to change our practice this year in how we reimburse sites. So first, we're going to talk about the one of the reports you got, which was about the attendance picture. So I'm going to ask Joy Turner, who has done an incredible job monitoring our data and developing this report for you. And I'm going to ask her she's going to actually share a couple of slides to explain the report. So you're, in case you weren't quite sure how to interpret the information we provided. Joy?
Thanks, Linda.
Next slide.
Yeah, next slide. So this is, I have a few examples to go through to explain how to read and understand the charts and just make sure everyone is on the same page. And then we'll talk through a few examples and then have some discussion and questions. So first of all, You'll notice on the handout that Linda sent you yesterday, there are up to 3 different charts per site. One is for their Durham Pre-K enhanced seats, one is for their Durham Pre-K only seats, and one has both of those combined into one chart. You probably noticed that some sites only have 2 charts. That's because they only have one type of seat. So in that case, they have the one for whichever type of seat they have, and then they have the other that can be compared easily to everyone else's total. In this first example, this is a site with DPK enhanced seats, and you can see that they had some struggles in enrolling children in these types of seats. The orange line at the top indicates the maximum number of seats that they were allocated. So in this case, that is 30 DPK enhanced seats is how many they were allocated at the beginning of the year. But you can tell by the blue marks for each month that they only enrolled around 20 per month. One thing to note is that the axis is different on each of these charts based on how many seats that particular site had. So you'll need to look carefully at the axis on each chart to know how many seats they have. To keep that in
Joy?
mind when you're looking at the scale, because some only had maybe 6 seats, but this site had 30. So that's one thing to make sure you pay attention to when you're looking at these. So
Joy, I'm going to interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
Just for a second. So in the chat, we had a question about that there was not clarity about the differences between the types of seats.
Okay.
So you'll recall that we have a braided funding model for our program, and we spread dollars across seats. So we have what we call Durham Pre-K only seats, which means that that seat is fully paid for locally and has no restrictions on enrollment, except for the restriction governance has given us, which is to prioritize children with greatest need. But it's open, it's a universal access seat. So a site may not have any Durham Pre-K only seats. We try to sprinkle them across, but depending upon where the need is. But we braid with NC Pre-K as well as Title I and Head Start. So another kind of seat we call is an enhanced seat. The enhanced seats are when a site is under contract to meet the Durham Pre-K standards, and so they're held to the higher standards, but we're braiding, and so that seat is partially paid with other monies. But what that means is it comes with restrictions. So an NC Pre-K enhanced Durham Pre-K seat gets the reimbursement rate. We pay the difference between the NC Pre-K rate and our Durham Pre-K rate. They have to meet the Durham Pre-K standards, but they're an NC Pre-K seat. And so the enrollment is restricted by the qualifications required to meet NC Pre-K requirements. So NC Pre-K has income restrictions. It is open to various incomes if a child qualifies for other reasons, or if a child's a military child. There's a variety of different factors that can make a child eligible for NC Pre-K, but NC Pre-K is not a universally available seat. And also there are other types of seats that we enhance. We enhance Title I seats, we enhance Head Start seats. But what it means is if it's not a Durham Pre-K only seat, the seat is restricted in who can sit in that seat. But we make it seamless for families. We don't want them to, they don't have to worry about that. It's a back of house issue. However, you can see how an unrestricted seat, in theory, would be easier to fill than a restricted seat. And that's why we pay attention and look. And Joy has broken this down because it matters. Obviously, we try to look at patterns, and if a site has been able to fill their NC Pre-K seats, but not their Durham Pre-K seats, we would be analyzing what the reasons for that might be, and vice versa. So hopefully that kind of makes it clear.
Thanks for that explanation, Linda.
Okay, Joy, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, thanks. Next slide. So this is an example of a DPK only site. So the enhanced seats are represented in blue in the charts, and the only seats that receive only the unrestricted seats, like Linda mentioned, are represented in green. The purple line on these charts are the maximum number of seats. And again, so in this site, they have a maximum of 21 seats that they were allocated. And you can see that this site were fully enrolled every month except for December. They had a vacancy in December, but other than that, they stayed fully enrolled the whole time. So enrollment was very strong in this site and not really an issue in this particular example. And then the next slide. So this slide is an example of the combined slide that shows all seats. In this example, there were 14 total seats allocated. Some of those were enhanced seats, some of those were DPK only seats, but they were never fully enrolled the whole year. You can see the DPK enrollment remained pretty steady throughout the year, but there was some fluctuation in the enhanced seats throughout the year. So that is something that, like Linda mentioned, that we're looking at not just their overall enrollment, but their enrollment per seat type, to see what we can learn. One thing I do want to note about these charts is that when you see sites that it looks like their enrollment remains steady throughout the year, where they were full almost every month or something like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that there was not child turnover. So in some cases, sites that had 100% enrollment, they did serve the same children the full year, and they didn't have any child turnover. But in some cases, they did have children leave. It's just that that child was replaced in the same month. And so they didn't see a gap in their payment because that seat was replaced within 1 month of that child leaving. And so you can't gauge anything about the turnover at sites through these charts. This is just showing if sites were paid for a seat in a month. That's other data that we can look at separately, but that's not represented in these charts. So you can go to the next slide. So as you scroll through and look at the handouts that have the charts for each site, I think it becomes fairly clear the overall enrollment was very strong this year. We had an overall enrollment, overall vacancy rate of 6% on average overall. Many sites were either completely filled or almost completely filled for the full year. And I think as you scroll through that you can see that. But looking at the data in this way, it helps us see that some sites struggled to fill enhanced seats, while others struggled to fill the DPK only seats. There's not really an overall theme as to which seats had more difficulty. It seems to be, site specific. And that lets us look at the particulars of each site and helps us make data informed decisions when we're making our allocations for next year, to see, and that is something that we did when we looked at our allocations for next year, to look at this site struggled with this seat type, but did well in this other. Let's kind of switch things a little bit for next year and see if we can help this site balance out their enrollment. And so that's the goal of looking at this data.
Can I ask a question, Joy?
Yeah.
The funding that's left over due to the vacancies, what happens to that funding? Is that relevant to this conversation? Because if not, you could just put that in the parking lot.
You want to address that, Linda?
Yeah, I'll address it. So basically what happens is, so throughout the year we manage the budget, and that's why we're very careful when we initially budget and make seat allocations. Obviously we can't budget to spend 100% of dollars because it doesn't land equally, obviously. And we have to, that's why during the year we came to you and we said, if there's money, can we do a teacher bonus? If there's money, can we do a classroom bonus? So we don't if there were to be a year where we really underspent in a shocking way, we would have to go to the county and we would obviously, we're very transparent about all of that. We haven't had that situation. We have had only overall, based on the overall budget, we've only had modest underspends each year because we try to account for the fact that you're never going to have 100% enrollment at all times. If we were to have a year where we had a really out of line underspend, we in the past, we've always talked about with the county about whether there would be an option to carry money forward. We presently do not have authorization to carry money forward. So money would revert back to the county, and the county has been very generous in their support of this program, and obviously we would hope to negotiate with them. But our goal is always to budget to serve as many children as possible and to monitor closely throughout the year how that spending looks. Hopefully that answers your question. So all the instructional money that is used for classrooms, when you vote to give a teacher bonus, for example, that comes out of that instructional money, and we calculate that bonus based on where we are with that spending. And that's why it's only a bonus. It's not guaranteed. It always depends upon the spending.
Thanks, Linda. So I just want to point out a couple of examples on your handout. So if you have that pulled up that Linda sent, on page 2 would be an example of a site that had very steady enrollment in all seat types for the year, just a small dip early on in the fall.
Hey, Joy.
Yeah.
Do you have it pulled up on your computer?
Uh-huh.
Do you want to share your screen just in case?
Sure.
Just in case some folks weren't able to access their handouts?
Yep.
Thanks. I know it's small, but
So, sorry, I'm trying to get it. So this is a site that was very well enrolled. If you look on page 3, this is a site that was full in their Durham PreK only seats all year, but struggle, kind of went up and down on their enhanced seats, and you can see the impact of that being they never reached the full enrollment. I definitely wanted to talk about Children's Campus at South Point because they have a unique chart. You see, they're the only one that has a orange line that moves. And the reason for that is that it was an unusual circumstance where NC PreK added additional NC PreK seats partway through the year. They added 6 seats in February. So you can see through January, they were pretty steady in their enrollment in these enhanced seats. They got the increased number of seats in February that bumped them up to 15. And then after that, they never quite got even close to their full allocation. It's historically difficult to fill seats that are added this late in the year. So that's not, terribly surprising. And as Linda mentioned, with these being NC PreK seats, there are also restrictions on the children that are eligible to fill that seat, which makes it even more difficult. So I wanted to explain the reason for that gap, because that's it's just a circumstance of that particular site. And that's why you see the change. That's the only site where seats were added mid-year. So that's the only site where you see that maximum number change throughout the year. And then there was another one. This I thought was an interesting example where you see like this site struggled a little bit in the first quarter, had some low enrollment, and then steadied out for the rest of the year. And so that was just kind of interesting. And then there's some examples like these are just some sites that don't have Durham PreK only seats, and that's why you only see 2 charts for those. So I guess, are there any questions about, this in general, or any, specific questions that anyone has, or observations that you wanted to share or ask about?
I mean, Joy, you mentioned that there were no really overall themes about sites that struggled to have full enrollment. What about for the sites that were fully enrolled? Were there any success stories or anything that they were able to do differently, that they had just full or pretty immediate replacement when a child or family left? Any stories from those experiences?
I mean, there's definitely sites that we just know are very high in demand because of their location. They're just in an area where there's a lot of demand. I do think this year overall, I would say, this is not site specific, but I would say that we did see more regular communication from sites when a child left. There's an exit form that they need to submit to let us know that a child left, so that then that seat can be replaced. It felt like we were getting those forms more regularly from a lot more sites this year, which of course facilitates the process of replacing seats when children leave. We can't replace a seat if we don't know that somebody left. And so that's something that I definitely noticed.
Yeah, I think one of the things, as we debated, it was very difficult to go back to paying on enrollment and attendance for the sites. And that's why we're very sensitive to, obviously their needs. But what we really believe and what we see, and this data seemed to show, is that when you strengthen the partnerships between the sites and the administration, so that you assure that your policies encourage regular communication. So by the fact that you're only getting paid with child in the seat, it might encourage more attention to enrollment and attendance, and that communication is critical. And I think that by strengthening those partnerships, being deliberate and intentional with our teams and with our directors in meetings, really trying to encourage them to do everything they can on their side of the house to make sure we're getting children in place promptly. It helps them be able to sustain their program by getting the resources they need. It helps us to really serve our community. So I think that's a big piece. I do think that Joy's right, that communication, just by looking at the submission of those exit forms, the communication from directors, it's clear that has definitely improved significantly. We do have some sites, I mean, let's face it, there are some sites that are so popular, they have parents who are just wanting to get in and they can easily fill a seat very quickly. There are other sites that we need to help them shine a light on how great their program is, because they may not be as familiar to people, or they may be in a location that's a little more challenging for parents. And, we want to be sure we're telling the story of the sites so that parents know that it's worth their extra time to get their child there, or, that their child's getting the best program they can get, and making sure that we're telling those stories in ways that families will be excited about enrolling. So, I think we're continuing coming out of the pandemic. If I had to say, the single biggest impact on enrollment attendance truly is that continuing to move away from the pandemic has really brought us back to where we were with our growth trajectory prior to the pandemic. We have a lot of demand, and I think that what these charts really showed me, I love the way that Joy worked them out to display them, is being able to really see, because we hear a lot of anecdotal comments about vacancies, 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 and sometimes people's experience and their comments don't match the data. And I think obviously that's because if it's my site and I have a vacancy, I'm worried about that. I'm going to assume there's lots of vacancies, lots of places. And so we always want to be sure we're doing a good job of being data driven and really analyzing. And Joy mentioned how the data informed us in making seat allocations for this year. We really did look closely at what kinds of seats are people having success with, what can we do differently. We didn't do a lot of tweaking of seat allocations because we're committed to being sure that we have a really good spread across Durham, but we did make some small tweaks because we do know that those Durham pre-K only seats are the most beneficial seats for sites because there's just, no restrictions on the children that they can serve. Okay, Joy, you want to stop sharing and go back and let's just go back to our slide deck. Okay, were there any other questions about the charts before we move on to our considering our closed session? Okay, next slide. Okay, so just to summarize, as we said, the pre-service part of our strategy for this year in reimbursements was to figure out how to stabilize the site budgets and how to fully support the very real expenses that come with offering the highest quality programs. So the pre-service payment that we developed really is innovative. We can't find anybody else doing this. That doesn't mean there's not anybody doing it, but we can't find anybody who's doing it. The purpose of those pre-service payments were really to stabilize the sites by assisting them with cash flow by providing those funds in advance of service. In North Carolina, even like in the subsidy system or in any of the programs, there's not anyone paying in advance. So we make one payment in advance of service as soon as the site is under contract. And then the purpose of that payment, not only to help with cash flow, is to mitigate the impact of vacancies throughout the year. So we said to you when you passed it last year, we said we would spend this year really studying it. So we want to report to you about it. And we want to go over reimbursements by site so you can see the impact. So we wanted to ask you to vote to go into closed session.
Thanks, Linda. Okay, so to go into closed session, we will need a motion to do so.
I move that we go into closed session.
Thanks, Jason.
Nice second.
Thanks, Beth. Okay, so all in favor of going into a closed session, just raise your hand, say aye. I like the hands up and the thumbs up. Okay, great. Any opposed? All right, it looks like it's